What's up, good people? Thank you for joining us here after a really tough game. Chargers lose 17-10, fall to 2-2. Rest of the division now 2-2 outside of the Chiefs, who are 4-0. Broncos and Raiders get the win today, so not much more movement in the standings. Chargers actually fall down; they're all tied for second, but a very winnable game. Chargers end up falling. They only give up 17 points to the Chiefs, but could only score 10. And that all came in the first quarter, Craig.
All right, so you can look at this two ways. Again, we talked about this a little bit before we started. They were super competitive, down a bunch of guys. Great. But then it's really maddening that there were opportunities to win this game or at least draw it out.
And he froze. Much like the Chargers through quarters 2, 3, and 4. Craig is frozen, which seems to happen like once a podcast now. But boy, was this really... Oh, you there now, Craig?
Yeah, man. Apparently my Wi-Fi doesn't want to talk about this either.
Yeah, you'll have to start over.
Yes.
Two ways.
Yeah, so you can either look at it as you were really competitive against the team that you were shorthanded against and technically weren't supposed to have much of an opportunity to win. And then you can look at it as, yeah, you actually had chances to pull this one out or at least extend it to where you could have given yourself a chance more so at the end, and it came down to maybe a play here, a play there. Either way, there's reason for optimism, or you could be super frustrated. It just depends on which direction you want to go with it. I, for one, am a little frustrated.
Okay. And what are you most... There's a lot to go here, but what frustrates you the most from this game?
Mostly the way that teams tend to get into these late game situations with the Chiefs and their butts pucker for some strange reason, man. It's as if they can't get out of their own way. You can't beat yourself when you're playing against the Chiefs. Getting into their red zone, actually inside the 5-yard line, and walking away with 0 points is absolutely inexcusable. And some of the play calling, the clock management, as far as the timeouts were concerned, are not something that I found to be conducive with Jim Harbaugh-led teams. They're usually pretty buttoned up. I understand all the penalties. You're dealing with the makeshift offensive line, a bunch of guys that have been moved around here and there. So some of that was to be expected, and some of these dudes just aren't very good. But the fact that you found yourself in a situation where you had held this team to 10 points, literally, they had not scored except for one big play, which, we can talk about at some point. But you hold the Chiefs to essentially 10 points. You have an opportunity to go up on them by at least 3. And you roll out with a play that does not speak to you being the bully that you claim you want to be. And then you put your quarterback in a compromising situation who's out there on one good leg. And you walk away with absolutely nothing. And at that point, I pretty much figured the game was over because they couldn't establish anything in the run or the pass consistently because you're depending on an offensive line on the interior that already isn't very good to begin with to help usher you down the field in a running game that you couldn't establish because of it. And then you're down your 2 best offensive linemen. It just felt like they did make the most of their opportunities. They gave themselves a chance early and they just couldn't hold on to it.
Yeah, it was very self-inflicted. It didn't feel like the Chiefs. You can get into, whether the Chargers beat themselves or the Chiefs beat them. But yeah, with a game that close, being tied 10-all, getting into their, 5-yard line at that point. And first off, Nick Bolton never touched Joshua Palmer. How the refs are able to make that call that he got touchdown early is ridiculous. And on top of that, not having somebody in the Chargers booth worn down to Harbaugh that's a first down, and they should get a new set of plays, new set of downs. I don't know what happened there either. But then on 4th down, kind of have a rollout and put it in Herbert's hand on a bum ankle when they're going to be pressuring him on a 4th and 1. It doesn't even make sense. And then for Herbert to just throw it out of the back of the end zone is even weirder because you at least got to give somebody a chance. So it was bad all around. They should have had a first down. The play call was bad. The execution was awful. There's a hole during it too. And then Herbert doesn't give his team a chance anyway. So, not that the refs really played a part in this because, the Chargers just kept shooting themselves in the foot. But this was probably one of the more winnable games they're going to have against the Chiefs. They're just going to get better throughout the season, and then you got to go to Arrowhead and try to beat them there, which is already a pretty tall task. But that play call and really the offense in general, outside of the first drive, just really didn't know what they wanted to do. They wanted to try to run the ball into Chris Jones a lot for some reason. Um, Offensively, there was a lot. There were all these play calls. It felt like the whole second quarter was they would get a stop on the Chiefs at like 45. Chiefs would have to punt. The Chargers would get it within the 10-yard line back up against their own end zone, and then they couldn't get it out, and then they'd punt, and then the Chiefs would get it back at the 45, and then it just became this like Chargers could never get past the 10-yard line. They were just getting backed up over and over again, and the offense wasn't rolling. Herbert obviously had no time to really work today. Not that it was his best game. The run game wasn't working. The offensive line was a mess, but all these penalties were just, I mean, even you could, I know there was a lot of movement around and everything, and the pressures, I think you can maybe chalk up to, hey man, Sally or Pipkins, everybody's basically play out of position except Bozeman and Zion. If there's some pressures, that's one thing, but then just the false starts, the chop block, not being on the line, like that's just stuff that you got to be able to. That's the bare minimum. At least play on time. If you're gonna miss it, I guess you could have some excuse, but just all the penalties that were happening, and then defensively they just weren't. They got ran over towards the end of that game, and Chiefs ended up scoring, and the game was pretty much over. But yeah, it was that fourth down play that really turned and kind of flipped the script, and they never recovered.
So, a couple of things. Got to run back to that Josh Palmer play. Yes. There was absolutely some funny business going on with regard to where that spot was and him having not been touched. But let's also talk about the fact that he had no reason to crumble as he caught that ball. That was a walk-in touchdown. I'm trying to figure out what was the thought process there. It almost feels like he caught the ball looking to just get the first down and keep the drive going, as opposed to catching the ball and getting upfield. Because literally, if he catches that ball while he's moving, he walks into the end zone virtually untouched. He hits the ground, realizes he hasn't been touched, freaks out, and then starts to roll because he realized, oh crap, maybe I shouldn't have gone this route. Probably had an opportunity to score. And then, it was all downhill from there. But with regard to the rest of the team and just the super inconsistency with regard to the offensive line. Yeah, dudes moving in and out, got all that. There's a level of discipline that you have to play in this scheme, in general, play the game. And this does not feel like something that Jim Harbaugh will tolerate or would allow to happen. Now, he can't make guys not jump off sides, but there should be literally the fear of God into them not to be doing things like this due to the repercussions. But again, some of these dudes are guys who don't really expect to be on the field very often this season anyway, because they're backups. So I don't know. It's not to say that they don't get the message as well, but there's something to say about time on task and maybe the moment being too big for some of them. But just overall, the sloppy play, essentially cheddar bobbing yourself all game long, backing yourself up, the poor field position, which didn't help. You could not find yourself in the scenarios that the Chargers did this game. There were multiple drives that started inside their own 10-yard line. And when you don't have a full complement of guys on the offense and, a hampered quarterback that you can't really rely to drop back more than like 2 or 3 steps, you're putting yourself in a scenario that's like the perfect cocktail for failure. So you weren't going to be able to establish the run game the way you wanted to, and you couldn't consistently pass the ball because in obvious pass situations, again, no pun intended, your quarterback is a sitting duck. And it felt like early on, whatever plays were scripted were very good. First 10, 15 plays, awesome. After that, all hell breaks loose. But again, I mentioned this in the Discord. There's no game planning for consistently being backed up into like 2nd and 15 and 3rd and 15. Like, I know people are giving Greg Roman a whole lot of guff for this, but let's be honest about it. you don't go into any game expecting to be dealing with this many penalties, one on top of the other offensively. And so he did the best with what he had, considering all the other things that he had to deal with. They came out earlier with quick passing game. They spent a whole lot of time in pistol, which I completely understood because you didn't want Justin Herbert playing under center. They also didn't want to necessarily have him in shotgun because there are a couple tells in shotgun, especially when you have a single running back there. Essentially there's only a one-way go for them. So they were trying to establish two-way goes with lining him up in pistol with the running back behind him and still giving him space to operate without being under center and putting him at risk there. As the game went on, you saw less of that, but one of the reasons was they were playing in negative down and distance so often. Give your offensive coordinator a break here. He wasn't perfect, but he was dealing with a ton. And you couple that with just some of the questionable play calling in key scenarios, where they were on the field, some of the defensive lapses. And again, it's like a perfect gumbo for a loss. You're playing the Chiefs into the fourth quarter in a close game. What do you think is going to end up happening? You can't allow that to go down because 9 times out of 10, you're going to lose that game.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like Roman definitely gets a pass for like the first half because that just, I mean, the way in which they kept backing themselves up in those, first and second longs and then being backed up against their own end zone. But going to that second half felt like they were a little bit better. They were able to manage their penalties better. They didn't come out and do a ton to hurt themselves, but they just couldn't get the ball moving. And when they did, they got all the way down, and then Dicker missed a field goal. Then they go and drive with 60 plus yards, get to the 5, and then have to then they turn it over on downs. And then when they really needed some plays, they couldn't give Herbert enough time to do it. So, it doesn't feel like, I feel like the game plan early on was really good offensively when they were on script. Second quarter, you kind of had to throw it out the window. But by the second half, I mean, they didn't know what to do. Nothing was working. They had one drive that worked. The second drive, they were gifted field position on the interception. So they were able to kick a field goal after multiple penalties. And then in the third and fourth quarter, there was nothing to really, hang your hat on because they couldn't get anything going. There were a couple nice passes to Palmer. McConkey was getting involved. But, I mean, outside of that, the running game wasn't really working. And then, it didn't feel like they really had anything going today going into that second half. And they didn't score in the second half last week either, did they?
No, negative 5 yards.
Yeah.
So they did absolutely nothing. This is a trend. Now, when we're talking about offensive game plan going into the second half.
Oh, you were just there and then we lost you. Well, until Craig comes back, which normally happens like 5 or 10 minutes after he freezes. And he's back now.
I'm sorry, guys. I have no idea what's going on today. Anyway, going into the second half, I noticed that they stopped running as much quick game as they were in the first half. And I knew coming into this game, this was going to be one of those situations where you're going to have to get the ball into the hands of guys who are really good with the run after catch, which are going to be QJ and Ladd. And they were doing that pretty well early on. Ladd had a very good game. He was probably the standout player of the game to me, specifically offensively.
Yeah.
Second half, much less of that. And again, there was no opportunity in this game to where you could find yourself having to put Herbert in 5 to 7 step drops. It just wasn't a good idea with what you had on the outside blocking for him. Now, there were pretty decent opportunities for shot plays on certain instances where the offensive line held up pretty well. But then you're asking guys who don't do that very well to do it. Quentin Johnston is not a great one-on-one contested catch wide receiver. He's been playing really well this season. I'm giving him props for that. I know people think we crap on him often, but I think we just fairly critique him. And when he plays well, we compliment it. When he doesn't, we talk about it. I mean, he has a really good third down catch where he converted, kept a drive moving, but I'm talking about the play calling to put him in situations where he's more likely to win than not. They have a really big issue with spacing in the passing game. Wide receivers almost always seem to be in the same place at the same time, creating opportunities for defenders to make plays on balls. And then also you're making the catch a much more difficult, situation for the wide receiver to get their hands on the ball and find open space to run to. So they have to work out the spacing issue. But just speaking specifically to the second half, certain things were working a little bit better to start off. The running game got off to a pretty good start in the second half. Gus Edwards showed up here and there, still not great, but showed signs of life. J.K. Dobbins really couldn't get it going today. He had that pass up the sideline that could have changed
Oh,
everything if he caught it. Justin Herbert did an amazing job escaping and getting that ball to where only he could catch it. The defender had no idea where the pass was. And if he catches that ball, I'm not saying he breaks it and goes all the way, but he's absolutely in plus territory, and they're cooking with a little bit of gas there. But you couldn't find yourself in the situation that they did in this game. And that's down a score where you need to score a touchdown to get back into the game and having to pass your way in order to do it. And that's what happened with 6 minutes left in the fourth quarter. And it's unfortunate, but they got themselves in that situation of their own volition. And there are going to have to be some lessons learned going into this bye week, and some changes are going to have to be made personally, I think. First and foremost, guys got to get healthy, but also
mhm.
game planning, I think, needs a tweak.
Yeah, I will say, and we've been harping on the offense because I mean they just ran out of gas after the first two drives, but which was really unfortunate. But defensively, the game plan to not so much like sell out on Mahomes, but to get an interior rush and wall him off, kind of create that brick wall up front, and then create some pressure on the side and help collapse that pocket. It really left Mahomes little to no room early on to operate. It felt like everybody had gap integrity. Romo kept like going on and on about, but they did. They, when they ran their stunts, they made sure somebody ran out wide. So Mahomes, if he did flush out of the pocket, there's somebody there to get him. They kept him inside, and then once it got in the fourth quarter, Morgan Fox and Troy Dye kind of bit on two pump fakes, which I absolutely hate. I don't know why we're buying that stuff still with Mahomes, but what they did defensively was really impressive for this Chiefs team. They of course they gave up that really long touchdown to Xavier Worthy, but outside of that one play that threw them back in the game in one play, and Gilman doesn't bite on the Kelsey crosser. I don't know why he did, but anyway. Defensively, they did a really, really good job. They ended up like giving up some chunk yards late on the ground. They were kind of worn down a little bit. There were a couple injuries. By the way, I don't know if you saw, Henley was down for a while and down, which seems kind of scary, but he was back in on that last drive.
He came back in.
So seems like he'll be okay. But I was really impressed with the game plan going into this game from Minter. They really pressured Mahomes on third down. Dupree got a sack that was huge on third down. Tarheeb still got one. There was a lot of, they got hands up to the line of scrimmage. We saw 3 different pass deflections aligned with Mack and Tooley and Poona Ford. It just felt like they had a really, really good recipe to slow Mahomes down and to kind of bottle him up. And it worked for most of the part, but of course, it just takes one throw for Mahomes, and they were back in that game off that Worthy touchdown. And then after that, credit to the Chargers. They only gave up another touchdown late, but it felt like defensively, Minter had a really, really good plan. They really had a nice way to kind of negate the explosiveness from this Chiefs offense, and they did a nice job throughout this game.
Yeah, I think the game plan was pretty solid. You had a few lapses here and there, especially on third down, which is where you can't have it because homeboy likes to just flutter around and create. But I hate watching him prance around on third down. It is so frustrating. It doesn't even look serious.
Yeah.
The whole pump faking thing, here's the problem with that. The reason why you don't fall for it is because you've seen it so many times and you're better off just trying to tee off on him. Just go put pads into him, attack him. Don't allow him to be the aggressor there. Make him make a move because he's not super agile. He'll just, try to play games with you, maneuver the ball. Here, first and foremost, you shouldn't be looking at the ball when he's scrambling like that. As a defender, and this is just something I was taught in coaching, whenever you're pursuing someone who's running the ball, you always watch their waist because they have to go wherever their waist goes. If he's going to complete a pass over you, you can still put your hands up to obstruct his view, but you never take your eyes off his waist. Don't worry about all the tricks with the ball because things like what happened today happen, and it happens all the time. There's enough of a book on Mahomes to where that's his thing, so you shouldn't be falling for it. But with regard to the rest of the defensive game plan, the thing that I really loved about what Minter did today was there were those situations where he baited Mahomes into escaping outside of the pocket where he thought he was going to have free reign on the outside. But essentially what they did was they crashed the edge and they looped a defensive tackle. So he still didn't have the open lane that he thought he would, and it threw him off a bit here and there. The problem is that there have been instances on third down where if the defensive tackle doesn't create enough pressure on him, he's able to buy time. The middle of the middle of the field opens wide up. And that's what happened again today. The Chargers have an issue at the second level in the intermediate portion of the field. If a play gets extended, especially if there's zone coverage, if a play gets extended a second or two longer than it should, it keeps happening. They're going to have to fix that. But outside of that, I think the defensive game plan was solid. They got a ton of pressure on him. You saw some key sacks. Tuli Tuipulotu played probably the best game of almost any of the edge rushers, in my personal opinion. He was hell for Mahomes all day long. It just wasn't enough, and the defense wasn't able to give the Chargers the one or two more plays that they needed in order to maybe give the offense better field position. Because if the Chargers were going to have to drive the ball like they did on the first drive, 70 plus yards each time they touched it, chances are things weren't going to work out in their favor. And, Dicker missed a kick, and you can't expect him to be perfect. Dude's a fantastic kicker. Glad we have him long term, but in games like this, it's going to come down to field position, winning a turnover battle, and not shooting yourself in the foot. And I'm a little surprised that Jim Harbaugh allowed that to happen today.
Yeah. The penalties are probably the biggest red flag from this game. It felt like, maybe offense deserves a pretty big red flag too, but it just felt like, the one thing we knew that Jim Harbaugh was going to do is have this team in line. It was going to be in his vision, and they were going to, march to his drum, and you felt like you would not see teams, maybe they, they win a game 12-10 or something, like a low scoring affair, but you're not going to see a bunch of turnovers. You're not going to see a bunch of penalties. They're probably going to be boring. They'll be, knocked down, drag out fights normally. And then, somebody will come up top at the end, but you won't see them make those type of mistakes. And to have that 2 out of the 4 games, they did it in the Raider game, because it really did mirror the first half of that Raiders game where they shot themselves in the foot over and over and over again. The Raiders had the lead, and then the Chargers were able to come back in that second half. This time, they shot themselves in the foot, and quite honestly, it feels like KC gifted the Chargers 10 points at that point. They gave them field position after that fumble and then that interception. They had a short field. They made mistakes. The Chargers capitalized. But then once the Chiefs stopped making mistakes and, giving them a short field, the Chargers couldn't do anything with it. And it was because of that constant penalties and all this, playing out of phase just feels weird for a Harbaugh team. And we've said it throughout the preseason and in the offseason that most teams, it takes about 4 weeks to figure out what kind of team they are. And you hope that at the bye, they can clean everything up, and then going forward, they won't have as many mistakes. But going into the bye with this type of game where it's very winnable and you basically shot yourself in the foot multiple times with penalties, you missed a field goal, which it was a 55-yarder. It's a low percentage kick, though Dicker is amazing still. And then that fourth down play that shouldn't have been a fourth down to start with. And then you run a fourth down play that just didn't work, that of course Chris Jones just blows up immediately. I don't know. You just don't really have a good feeling going into the bye week. It's not like, it's not over. They're still 2-2. They're at 500. They're a game back, they're 2 games back from the Chiefs, but then they lose that kind of tiebreaker unless they can go and beat them in KC, which is going to be a tall task, like we talked about earlier. But it just feels like the vibes aren't as good as they were, not only like losing the games, but just kind of how they have lost these last 2 games, winnable games. And you hope they can kind of flip the script and get guys healthy, but they're going to have to figure something out. I don't know if Slater and Alt, even with another week, are out. I don't know you can roll this same offensive line they had here in week 4 into week 6. I don't think you can do that. There has to be some kind of wholesale change across this line. It is definitely not good enough.
No. And sorry, I want to address this really quickly. I'm not sure if it's like trolling and whatnot going in the chat. I don't know if people actually listen to what I say. I didn't blame the defense for this loss. My point was that in a game where you're shorthanded on offense and you can't move the ball like you would like to offensively for numerous reasons, whether it be because of multiple penalties, guys being out, all that jazz, the other two phases of the game have to do more than what you would typically ask of them. So it's not their fault if they can't. You're asking them to go above and beyond. And sometimes it works out, other times it doesn't. That's what happened today. So I'm not blaming the defense. I've said from the very beginning that they had a very good defensive game plan. So just listen to the words that come out of my mouth and stop creating agendas here. But again, overall, yeah, like you mentioned, I don't really know. Offensively, the O-line is weird because I'm a little concerned about Rashawn Slater and the pec injury because I think it's to the same side that the bicep injury was a couple years ago. That's never great. We'll learn more about it, I assume, over the course of the bye week to find out where he stands. Joe Alt was at least questionable for the game, so we'll see how that goes 2 weeks from now. But nah, you can't roll out this iteration of the offensive line coming out of the bye. It's pointless. You're still going to have Herbert dealing with this high ankle sprain. He'll have a week to rest it. But outside of that, what are you going to do about the fact that the interior offensive line struggles against any team that has just decent interior defensive linemen? The problem with today is that, like I mentioned before, you came up against a team whose strength, the literal best player on their defense, was an interior defensive lineman that was going to wreak havoc all day long, and you couldn't depend on blocking on the perimeter to like maneuver around it because you were down your best two tackles. So it literally had to be a field position game, and your defense was going to have to make a couple plays, and your special teams were going to have to step up also. It's just there wasn't enough to go around, and coming out of the bye, yeah, there are some questions to be answered. But the offensive line, I wouldn't be surprised to see Joe Ortiz try to do something here in the next 2 weeks, as far as whether it's a signing or we're talking about like trading for guys. But right now, if these guys that are out don't come back, then you have to find some level of reinforcement. And I don't believe it's currently on the roster.
So, Payway asks,
Like the restaurant?
what are some good goals to figure out during the bye on how the Chargers can adapt and grow as a team? So going in to the bye, it feels like, and I still have confidence in this team. I haven't completely sold out. I maybe it's just blind faith in Harbaugh, which this is what we wanted. And, Roman wasn't built in a day, but you feel like if they can, and Payway mentioned it too, if their penalties killed this team, injuries have killed this team, and then this second half offense has helped kill this team in the last 2 weeks. If they can clean those couple of those things up, penalties feels like could be an easy fix. You're gonna have to figure out the offense, but outside of that, it feels like there's a couple things, few tweaks that they can make to, because these are both winnable games. They lost them both, but what is something you hope going into the bye? And we talked about interior offensive line, so let's skip over that because it does feel like they're going to need to make a change there. What would you do going into this bye? What are you focusing on?
Tweaking my passing game to better fit what you currently have, unless you're planning on making a move there as well, as far as like a tight end is concerned, because they need tight end help. This style of offense requires an above average tight end, like as a focal point. It's unfortunate that I think we all knew that going into the year. So we were expecting something to happen in the draft and it didn't, like at some point, maybe not in the first round. I don't think we were really talking about that at all. But at some point,
people are still talking about that, correct?
I know what you're talking about. Oh, that's cool. Yeah, I saw that. That was interesting. A little back and forth there.
Oh my God, man.
Wow. Well,
okay. Sorry,
look,
go ahead.
I'm not going to disagree that the offense doesn't need a tight end. I think we've all been saying that this offense needs a tight end
Craig,
now
for 4 or 5
years.
Yeah. Since Gates.
But again, I don't think people actually listen. I think it's all about gotcha moments and picking and choosing certain things that get said, not putting full context around, because context isn't fun. Like, agendas are much more interesting. So don't worry about facts. Anyway, as far as tight ends are concerned, yeah, absolutely. The team needs to probably invest in one. And I don't know if that happens here. I mean, there are some teams that like the Ravens that hoard tight ends that maybe you could take a look at, or there's one over in Vegas that, Tom Telesco is way too scared to engage in a trade conversation about. So I don't expect
And
that.
you're talking
But
about Michael Mayer and not Brad Bowles,
correct.
right? Yeah, yeah.
And funny because I didn't love Michael Mayer for the previous offense, but he fits this offense like a glove. So it
Mhm.
would make sense, but Tom Telesco is never gonna like put himself in a situation to let his former team one up him. So, no. But I do believe that there's gonna have to be some tweaks made into the passing game, because by virtue of the interior offensive line not being great, you're going to run into teams that are able to stop you from running the ball. And then you're going to have to depend on the passing game. So you're going to have to give Justin Herbert some more options. And he's going to have to find a safety blanket. Ladd's great. But I'm talking about just someone that can maybe body dudes out and catch passes and keep the chains moving. You don't have to manufacture like these huge gaping plays in order to keep them moving. They need someone who can work the middle to intermediate portion of the field that's more of a force. And so I would like to see them either find some way to alter the passing game. Who that person can be that's currently on the roster now, I don't believe that they own or possess or own. Wow, that's really bad talking about people who can't own folks, but they don't currently have on the roster as we speak. But yeah, to me, it's the passing game. And again, it's by virtue of the fact that the interior offensive line is really lacking.
Yeah. And how bad was that drop by Hayden Hurst today in the fourth quarter? I mean, dude had what felt like a tarmac waiting for him 30, 40 yards downfield and just dropped it. While Herbert's like rushing to get it off, he's running for his life and you can't save the man. But anyway, yeah, the tight end has been an issue. I joked since Antonio Gates, but it's been a very long time.
I mean, Hunter Henry's doing decently this year, and he had a pretty solid Chargers career outside the injuries. So, I mean, he would actually
Kinda.
be a good tight end in this current offense also, strangely
Okay.
enough.
All right.
Just saying.
Okay. He was serviceable. Okay. But yeah, I mean, a tight end would be good. Serge wants to know about training for Kyle Pitts and whether that's a good idea. But they won today. Falcons beat the Saints today
Oh,
in
yeah.
Atlanta.
That's why I haven't heard from any of my family members.
They're also 2-2. So I mean, unless the wheels fall off, I don't see that happening. But yeah, it just feels like there's a lot of teams out there that have abundance of tight ends that the Chargers could go and pick up. But is that the one that's going to push them over the hump? Do we feel like tight ends the position where if they get a guy that this is what's going to help push this offense forward? I just don't know. Feels like go ahead.
No, go ahead. No, I
was gonna say that like offensive line feels like such a bigger priority at the moment. With Herbert's injury and how they're playing right now, they need more pass catchers for sure. You saw it with the Chiefs. The Chiefs came back at one play. It took them one play to get to Xavier Worthy and get back into a game they were down 2 scores. Chargers do not have that. And then when they went down 7, I don't know if anybody had confidence they were going to march down the field and score 7. I don't think anybody thought it was even going to be in the realm of possibility. And it wasn't. I mean, it didn't even really get off the ground. So at some point there, and I know this is they talked about how this is going to be a process. And a lot of people thought like, hey, year 1, they're going to build that foundation. By year 2, 3, they're going to be off the ground and running. But I don't know. It just feels like they need to get some more offensive weapons. And that I think a tight end could help, but it just feels like there's so many holes. I don't know that they can fill it in this kind of trade deadline-ish time.
You know what I still can't quite figure out is, and we mentioned it, so it's why I didn't say, offensive line again, because it wasn't an option. We had already covered it. So yeah, I agree. Interior offensive line, then tight end. But what I can't figure out is, and I think maybe it was because he was dealing with an injury this week, so maybe that was the reason why they didn't utilize him in this way. And they actually still haven't all season. You don't have DJ Chark right now, so you don't have a true vertical threat. But I don't understand why they don't utilize Darius Davis more as just a vertical decoy. Maybe you can get him on a deep shot here or there, or even if you can just get him to occupy a corner and a safety and open up the intermediate portion of the field for your other receivers to do the dirty work underneath. They just won't do it. I don't expect that you line him up on the line of scrimmage and ask him to get off press coverage, but you can absolutely put him in motion and let him run wheel routes up the sideline. And again, just give them eye candy, give them things that they have to respect. And then you can manufacture offense that way. Right now, teams don't fear the Chargers vertically. And quite frankly, they haven't for some time now. But the fact that they don't use these pieces the way that I think they could is a little puzzling to me. And if you have one really good deep speed guy, which I don't know if they believe he is or not, but someone who runs, mid 4.3 should absolutely be some when you deploy to the deeper portion of the field, just to make teams have to respect it. It also helps open up your run game a little bit as well, because you've got one less defender there that can commit to the box. Again, I think the passing game needs to be retooled, and this speaks a little bit more to that. So overall, just questions to answer on the offense more so than the defense, because I think the defense is just fine. They're just being asked to do a ton, and they can only hold up but for so long. And again, you had the fastest dude to ever run a 40 at the combine that apparently didn't have safety help over the top, or the safety help came late. Can't remember exactly how that worked. I have to see on the rewatch. And it
He
would be
bit
fun.
on the Kelsey crosser in front of him.
Okay. So yeah, it would be fun to have someone like that. You don't exactly have that guy, but you have someone with, tremendous deep speed that you can utilize that you just don't for some strange reason.
Yeah, and he's I'm pretty concerned with Darius Davis as a return man. Another mental mistake again to get the Chargers inside the 10-yard line, backed up against their own end zone. It just feels like there's one of these a week now with Darius Davis. It's definitely becoming a pattern. And defensively, I mean, outside of what was it, a 54-yard pass? I mean, we're talking about, Mahomes throwing for under 200 yards. I mean, this defensively, they did pretty good. They were able to get to him 3 times. He didn't play all that well today. I know, you knew they were going to force feed Travis Kelce, and they did a pretty good job of kind of limiting him as well. I mean, I know he ended up getting 89 yards, but it was on 7 catches. There was the one big play, the 38-yarder by AJ Finley, across AJ Finley, who actually came back on a 3rd down and broke up a pass on Travis Kelce. So a nice little bounce back performance for Finley. But, it felt like once Rice went down after that interception, they were going to just bottle feed Kelce, and they tried to from time to time. And, he got a couple of his, which you expected, but they did a nice job defensively without Derwin James and without Joey Bosa, without Jasir Taylor. And so there was some nice play today, and it felt like the defense is kind of and it depends on who's out and all that. And I'm going to caution myself from even saying this, but it doesn't feel like they're it feels like there's a lot of you can like plug and play type guys, where if Jasir Taylor's down, you've got Tarheeb still. If Bosa's down, put in Thule, and he's going to do a great job on the other side. Like, there's guys that feel like can fill these roles, and they're kind of almost interchangeable. Molden doing a pretty good job today without Derwin James. It just feels like defensively they're in a pretty good spot, hoping there's no more major injuries, and Bosa's back hopefully soon and can play the rest of the season. But offensively, it just feels like the depth is lacking, and they just don't have enough guys to make plays. And hopefully when DJ Chark comes back, that helps. But there's I'm more concerned about the offense than I am about the defense going to the bye.
No, I agree with you wholeheartedly. As far as the offense is concerned, I was actually thinking about this. Many of us were before the season started. It was going to take a historic ground game in order to make the passing game really viable. Something that teams had to fear week in and week out. Maybe not even historic, just an offense that can bludgeon you regardless of who you're playing against. You're going to have to respect that ground game, because they were going to have a great 1-2 punch. Gus Edwards still hasn't. I don't know what's up with Gus. I'm kind of concerned at this point.
Yeah.
It hasn't materialized. It's basically J.K. Dobbins or absolutely nothing, and that's not going to work. If you shut down that phase of the game or that portion of the offense, then you can't rely on your passing game just because that they don't have enough, and you've got the interior offensive line that's a problem. So there are a lot of offensive questions, more so, way more so than defense. We could venture to say defense is playing a little over their heads because some of these names we didn't expect to be great, and they have been performing very, very well. This is in the absence of Joey Bosa. Wait, isn't it super convenient that Derwin James was out today? Like in a game where Rashee Rice goes out and then they have to force feed Travis Kelce. And you just so happen to not have Derwin James out there. Oh, by the way,
Mhm.
they were treating that dude like they had him on shirts that they were practicing him before the game, like
Mhm.
RIP. Did he pass? Did we miss that or something? Because I don't recall that. I didn't see anything happen. I didn't see any like
It
tributes from
was
Swifties or anything along those lines.
free
But
my man Derwin. Or yeah.
no, not Derwin, Kelce.
Oh, you're talking about Kelsey was on
Yeah,
shirts?
yeah, the
Oh, I
players and
missed
fans,
that.
like, they had Kelsey shirts on, like, something
Oh.
tragic happened to him, like, nah, he's
Oh.
just not had a good year, which
Hmm.
happens, but Chiefs always seem to need a cause every single year, and apparently this is the one. So you knew the second I saw those T-shirts pop up on TV, I'm like, "Oh, this dude's gonna get, like, 10 targets today." But there was no Derwin to cover for that, but the defense still held up pretty well, again, outside of the one huge play. So you got to do something to spark this offense, man. Whether it's going to be adding another receiving threat, whether that be a wide receiver, someone who's a little bit more deep speed, or a tight end, which I would prefer it be a tight end. Now that you have DJ Chark coming back here after the bye, you got some guys that'll be healthy, and you're able
Mhm.
to throw into the mix. So maybe that opens up your offense a little bit more, and that's what they're waiting for. It could possibly be that they're just hampered due to injuries and they can't do what they were planning on doing because you don't have that true deep threat. So yeah, still offense over defense. I'm not going to say anything disrespectful about the defense because if it were not for this defense, the Chargers would not be in any of these games.
Talk to me. Maybe I missed something. What's going on with Jordan McFadden?
Good question.
Is he just? I mean,
I,
what happened?
I don't know. It seemed like they had such big plans for him, right? Like it went
Yeah.
from talks
How
of
did he
him
not get to
having
start today?
Mm. Something's missing there. They went from talking about him having the ability to play center to, definitely guard. Even had him lining up at fullback. And let me real quick. I have to divert to this for a second.
Oh,
I
okay.
like Scott Matlock, but I'm starting to get my fill of him as a lead blocker playing fullback because he gets lost in the trash, stops his feet, and the running backs get stuck behind him. It's not a natural position for him. I get that he's learning. Good that he caught a pass in the flat, ended up out of bounds on a play that I thought he got a first down on, but
God.
whatever. But yeah, that thing, I feel like it's a project that isn't working the way that it needs to at this point. When it works, it's good, but when it's bad, it's terrible. And today it stood out like a sore thumb. But yeah, as far as McFadden goes, they were using him as a fullback during camp.
Uh-huh.
It's like the dude, he's on a milk carton now. So I don't know what's up with him. He's in the doghouse for some reason, and I'm assuming it's just performance based.
Yeah, I mean he's been inactive for the first couple weeks, and then they get I don't even know how to say his name. Is Mustafa?
Yeah. Mustafa, I think it's Mustafa,
Whatever
something.
that is. How
Yeah.
how did Mustafa jump ahead of McFadden? All of a sudden, he came out of nowhere. They're hyping up McFadden and his versatility, and they also said that about Matlock. And then now they got to move. They got a makeshift offensive line, and McFadden can't even get a starting snap. I don't understand it.
Well, it's kind of like Tomlinson, right? Like they sign him out of the blue, and then suddenly he's just on the field all the time in front of Stone Smart. Which I understand if you're looking to, pound the ball, then Tomlinson's going to offer you more in that regard than Smart does. But I don't know. I'm really not sure what's going on there. I haven't heard anything about him whatsoever. So again, I can only personally attribute it to, I guess, performance. He's not practicing well. It's the only thing that lines up to me. But the way that they were moving him around as much as they were this offseason, I assume that he was stepping up and they thought he was an asset, more of a weapon, like Jim Harbaugh likes to refer to his offensive lineman as, but the dude can't see the field.
And Matlock, I mean, this experiment is wearing on me bad. I mean, we we've got drop balls in timely situations throughout the season. Today on a second down, I mean, a normal pass catcher is going to be aware of the sideline and make sure that he keeps his feet in so he can get a first down. But when you got a defensive lineman catching passes, of course he's not aware of that stuff. Steps out early, they can't get the first down because Tomlinson misses a block on the edge. It's just, I mean, that stuff's just a mess. And it's not like Matlock is, the kind of like, rolling ball downhill type fullback that you need in this system. He's running, stopping, trying to find somebody, and by that time, it's like he's creating a wall for Gus and JK before they can even hit a hole somewhere. It's like he's becoming part of the run game in a negative way each time he has to go out there and block somebody. So I mean, Matlock seems fine as a defensive lineman. I mean, I know that like he was pretty effective at Boise State, but what are they doing now? I mean, is it really that important to get Matlock involved? Can you not find an actual fullback, somebody who can catch passes? I love that look with JK and Gus in, as Gus kind of that leading fullback, and JK where they rolled that up a couple times. I love that look. This Matlock experiment is, I mean, we got to stop with this. Is he not a defensive lineman anymore? I don't even see him play defense all that often now. So I don't know. I'm not understanding. And I know like the internet loves him because he's doing both, but he's not doing both well. So, it's great that he's versatile and he's a guy that just wants to play football. You love that he loves to do that. But if he's not serving the offense, especially in the run game, then get him out. And also don't throw him the ball. Like, don't put him in on passing downs, period. It makes no sense to have him out there unless he's pass blocking or he's a decoy of some kind. I don't mind him doing that, but don't throw him the ball. Stop it.
Look, the Ginger Juggernaut is a great story. We love the fact that he's all about ball, and Harbaugh seems to love him, and he's willing to give effort on both sides of the ball. But you shouldn't play a guy just for the hell of playing him. Let's be honest here. They're doing this to save a roster spot. Like they did this to not have to have a true fullback, and it's sort of biting them at this point because he's not adept enough to give you consistent fullback snaps. And it's rearing its head here in games again when you're playing against teams that have decent interior defensive linemen, because you've already got guys on the inside that aren't great handling one-on-ones. So if they miss their assignments, Matlock isn't doing anything to really clean it up. He's just getting stuck behind the offensive lineman. And essentially it's a 2-on-1 and no one's winning, which makes no sense whatsoever. And you're having situations where I'm seeing J.K. Dobbins having to do too much stopping his feet and cutting back against the grain, looking for open, creases to run through. There's almost nothing clean. And for a team that is supposed to be power-based, who runs some outside zone, you have to have more efficient blocking on your interior or those plays don't develop properly. And Matlock's not really adding much to your offense. So you have to ask yourself a question. Is it worth saving that fullback spot, that extra roster spot, and having someone that can do more? And just because he's doing more, I guess you view that as adding value overall to the team. But if he's not a positive contributor, then you got to figure something else out. And there are other options. You're going to have to look into that during this bye week, again, specifically because you have such a questionable interior offensive line that it's forcing you to have to make some of these calls. And therein lies your problem. We keep going back to that. Until they figure out the interior offensive line, you need a viable fullback. You can't keep running with this experiment. It's not going to work out.
And it's not his fault. I mean, he's a defensive lineman. It's 4 NFL games that he's had to play now. And I know that he played, a little bit in college at Boise State on some goal line packages. But I mean, I don't blame Matlock. It's just he's getting in the way of the offense at this point. He is not serving the offense. And if he's not, he needs to get out. And everybody else that isn't needs to get out. And I get that's easier said than done with some of this offensive line because they've got both bookends hurt right now, and they're kind of having to piecemeal a couple of guys together. I understand that. Hopefully they can figure out a way to make that work. But with Matlock, just give him one position and hope that he can do it well. Something that happened while we're talking here, Craig, the initial sign for Rashee Rice is he tore his ACL. So they think it's season ending. It did not look good on the replay. I mean, his knee went backwards. So that does not surprise me at all.
Yeah. And unfortunately, I mean, they won the game at the end of the day, but Mahomes cost them twice on the same play, throws a pick, and then takes his own guy out. So, overall, just a really sad situation. I know people out there have their feelings about Rice for what he did off the field. None of that's justified, and I'm not either. But I don't like to see any guy get injured. It's their livelihood. Hopefully, he learned from his mistakes and he was working to do better. But yeah, I'm not shocked. That was a nasty hit that he took from Mahomes. He led with his shoulder and went directly into his knee, and you saw it hyperextend. So I was kind of expecting it was going to be something along the lines of a torn ACL.
Yeah. All right, guys. If you guys got questions, come send them in. We're close to wrapping up here. Going into the bye week, a lot of questions, so I'm sure you guys got it. We'll probably have hopefully a roundtable coming up soon with a bunch of your questions too. Craig, Sergio's got a question for you. He's been trying to ask this. 1 month in the season, do we regret Harbaugh signing over Belichick?
I don't. Reason being is I know some people won't love this, but what has Belichick done without Tom Brady? It's a serious question to ask. And I know that we're probably looking at him as like, a hard-nosed disciplinarian. I just think that his style of ball, the way that he coaches is a bit antiquated when you're talking about today's football players. It worked well for the Patriots during their heyday while they were a dynasty. But again, the question begs, like, without Tom Brady, what has he done? We've seen Tom Brady without him and what that led to. Mm-hmm. So I think he's a product of a situation. Great coach. I'm not taking anything away from him, but I've seen Jim Harbaugh win in multiple places in multiple different situations, and I know his system works regardless as to who's in it. It will at least end being pretty successful. I know we're questioning things right now, but you also have to take into account a lot of the guys that are playing due to injury are not necessarily cats that would be seeing a lot of field time otherwise. So overall, without going off on a tangent here again, no, I don't regret it. I mean, Harbaugh still works for me. He was who I wanted first and foremost, and that hasn't changed.
I can't believe that this ended with Belichick. I mean, do we regret hiring Harbaugh? They're 2-2. I mean, I don't know. Belichick is a win the first two. Well, maybe against the Panthers.
Well, he's unemployed right now, so there's that. Also,
yeah, yes, that. Yeah, I was going to work my way there. Nobody else wanted him either. No, you're right. But you're right. I mean, nobody else wanted him either. We certainly didn't want him, even when he was the hot name, even when there were rumors about him coming over, and we said that wasn't the case. I mean, if I remember correctly, he did get to the playoffs after Brady with Mac Jones in his rookie year, I think. After that, it was nothing. But his style of football is long in the past. This style of football is my brand of football that Harbaugh's running right now. Yes, they lost the last two games. I understand that. There's been some real bad injury luck. Both games they've been really close to. And honestly, I mean, they gave the Chiefs a lot today. Defensively, they kind of had Mahomes figured out for a little bit. I know that he got, Worthy got loose for a little bit. They kind of wore him down in the fourth quarter, but I don't know, man. I'm pretty confident going into Arrowhead than I am in previous years with this regime. And it just feels like there's a couple things they need to clean up, and they could be a pretty good football team. They can get back on track. I know they got to go to Mile High after the bye, which, Broncos won today. They beat the Jets in an ugly game, but I think we'll get going. But this Belichick thing is crazy. I can't even believe this is in the question. But no, nobody regrets it. Craig doesn't, as he said. I for sure do not. If from Payway, what's the one thing we could improve to become playoff contenders?
I mean,
realistically,
it sucks. It sucks to keep saying this. You can improve the interior offensive line. It's possible. The reason why I keep alluding to this is because it accounts for so many other things. I also think one of the reasons Gus is having such a hard time is because the interior offensive line is so bad because he's a north-south runner. He can't really make things happen if there's penetration into the backfield. He's one of those dudes, kind of like think of King Henry. Like he has to get ahead of steam, get downhill, and then he's really hard to stop. Well, it takes him about 3 to 4 strides before he can really build up that head of steam and become a difficult guy to tackle. But when you're handing the ball off to him and he can only make it to the line of scrimmage before he's getting contacted, then he can't be super effective. So yeah, you can improve the interior offensive line. I do want to see maybe some mix and matching in there, potentially maybe look to trade. But here's a case in point. The Kansas City Chiefs' best attribute on their offensive line is the interior. Their tackles suck. And somehow, some way, they're still finding the opportunities to be successful in the running game because they can literally run up the A gap, B gap. They can operate in between their guards and make life living hell for you. And if you can keep Mahomes in the pocket, he can deal from there because he doesn't have to worry about that pressure directly in his face. So we are like the antithesis of the Chiefs. We have great.
Damn. At some point, Craig's gonna get better internet, and we're gonna have a nice show here. But we're gonna move past it until he comes back, which will be like any second. From Pokey Pop and TV, are we worried about Herbert not being able to keep a cool head? I don't know if you saw this, Craig. I know you're back.
Yeah. New service provider coming in October, by the way.
Oh, really? Nice.
Yeah, screw this. No, well, I think it's November. We're already switching over. This is ridiculous.
Pokey Pop and TV, who clearly big fan of Pokemon, like us, Craig, right? You a big Pokemon guy?
Not really Pokemon. I'm more of a Dragon Ball Z dude.
Oh, okay. All right.
I don't hate it.
All right.
My kids love Pokemon.
Yeah, of course. Are we worried about Herbert not being able to keep a cool head? Did you see Herbert slam his helmet into the bench today? Have you seen that GIF?
Yeah. I'm not concerned. I mean, he's annoyed. I'm glad that he's showing some emotion. He cares. I'm perfectly fine with it. And it is frustrating, especially when you know everything that's supposed to happen. So you're holding people accountable. Like that dude has to know everything. He's got to know the protection. He's got to know the routes. He has to know all the plays. And you don't really have to say that about another position on the football field. So yeah, I would expect dudes to know how to do their job when I have to literally do more than you do. So the fact that he's showing some emotion doesn't bother me at all. And Herbert's a pretty level-headed kid. It's just he gets frustrated, and it's human emotion. Nothing wrong with it.
I love it. I'm on the exact opposite plane of this. His whole career, people were talking about that he's not a good leader, that he's quiet. He doesn't have enough fire. We saw a pregame speech of him cussing, using the F word, which I don't know that we've seen him use before. Slamming the helmet because he's upset. Good. I love the passion from Herbert. If it's a guy like Bosa, who seems to kind of slam his helmet in bad times and get really frustrated at really bad times that affect him during the game, I'm concerned about that. Mm-hmm. Justin Herbert slamming his helmet against the bench today, I'm not concerned about. I don't know that we know the reason behind that, but it felt like on that drive, he was getting play calls pretty late that drive, was really frustrated about getting his guys lined up in time. And I felt like we saw a little bit of that today too, which is something they're going to have to clean up in the bye week. But it just felt like he couldn't get going on that drive. The plays came in late. He got the plays out. They were up to the line of scrimmage, couldn't get the offense going. They felt a little kind of scattered. And I'm assuming that's what it was about, but I love it, man. I love the passion from him.
Yeah, I have no problem with it at all. And it's another one of those scenarios. Like, what do you want from him? You said that he was a robot before. Now he's showing emotion, and now it's like, oh, he might be doing too much. Pick your poison. What is it that you want, one way or the other? But I'm perfectly fine with the emotion, and it again tells me a lot about how much it means to him. The dude's out there playing on one good foot already, so he's already having to deal with that. And then the fact that the pass protection isn't up to par right now. Get him the plays in, okay? Do your job so that he can do the most optimal he can with all of the circumstances surrounding him.
All right. Antonio Stevens, is Zion salvageable? It's still a small sample size. He has not been good for 4 games. That we cannot deny. But we felt like if anybody could save this interior offensive line, it'd be Harbaugh. If he's not fixed by week 8 or 9, he is not salvageable, and he should walk when he's a free agent. first round tag or not. He's not good enough right now on the interior. And by the way, I think is really hurting Dobbins and Zion. I mean, JK just seems to be making the best of a pretty bad situation on the interior, but Gus just can't get out of the way. He runs into a wall every time. So is he salvageable? I still have hope that he could be. I thought he played pretty good against Carolina, to be honest with you, actually. But also that, I mean, again, that team sucks. So I mean,
That's the
it might
point.
be just because of the competition, but yeah, I'm still not completely out on Zion, but he has not been good.
Yeah, same thing that you said there about who the competition was. It can't be your performance can't be competition dependent. You're either good enough to do the job or you aren't. So if you slaughter terrible defensive linemen, great. But then when you play against someone at your level or above and you get worked all game long, then it tells me everything about who you are as a player. Zion was a great prospect coming out the year that he did. He was the best interior offensive lineman in that class. But the thing about it is sometimes you go back and look at those classes and then you reassess. Was the overall class very good? Did he just happen to be a really good player in a bad class? There are all those questions you can go back and retroactively ask. I just think right now, his struggles, if you notice or not, they really started based on the center play next to him. When he played next to Corey Linsley, he
Mm-hmm.
was decent. Corey Linsley goes down. It's not been the same since. Super up and down, more down than up. And centers are important, folks. I think that goes without saying, but I'm gonna, stress it anyway. The center play is horrible right now. And I think it does affect your guard play. Trey Pipkins also matchup dependent. He hasn't been a complete loss, but he hasn't been great. Of the three, he's probably been the best, but that's not saying a whole lot. The bar is super low. So I think when we're talking Zion, he's salvageable, but he needs to be sandwiched in between good tackle play, which he has. I mean, is when Rashawn Slater is available, and really good center play. So is he overall a good player individually? I guess you have to ask yourself that question as well, because if it means he has to play in between two different players, maybe he's not all that great. But I do think having a viable center next to him would help his game tremendously. So they got to fix something. And me personally, I would start with center.
Lindsley made a lot of things much easier when he was healthy and with the Chargers. We'll take one more from Sergio Lopez. Would you take a fourth or a fifth for Joey Bosa?
Jamie would love this question right now, I'm sure.
Yeah, and oh yeah, he would tee off. And we teams did call in to the Chargers last trade deadline for Joey Bosa. I'm sure they'll be doing it again if they wanted to. But you willing to take a fourth or a fifth?
I mean, I know a lot of people won't love this. I don't really care though, because it's not what I'm about. But yeah, because that fourth or fifth round pick at this point, like, you don't know what it's going to turn into, who you're going to be able to get for it, what you'd be able to trade it for potentially. But what I do know is that Joey Bosa is not available, and that's an issue. We've been trying, or I speak for myself, I've been trying my best to hold off from I'm not going to dump on the dude. I don't want to do that for any player. But the point is that you get these flashes of greatness and they're immediately followed up by injury. And if you've got a guy on the bench that you're paying that amount of money to, it doesn't matter if he's super talented. If he's not producing, if he's not giving you anything, he's literally just taking up a roster spot. And essentially, you're just hoping you can get a couple good games out of him. Now, if this team goes into the year and they get on a roll, right? Like, I don't remember what week the trade deadline is, but if they get on a roll and they've been able to do it without a lot from him, then there's no harm in keeping him around for the rest of the year, as like you can get a couple good games out of him as a quote unquote rotational piece, because it's an extra body that's already a piece of something that's showing itself to be productive. I know that it doesn't make sense with regard to letting him walk and getting nothing for him per se, but I mean, no, that's not true. If he walks, does he have an extra year? Did he sign an extension? Did he do a contract extension? I can't remember. Is he just walking at the end of the year?
Hold on, I'm gonna check that. I know they did a contract negotiation, but I don't know if they ended up or a restructure. I'm not sure if they added another year or not. I'll look it up.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I think I know he took a pay cut. I just don't remember what I think this was his last year, if I'm not mistaken. I don't remember exactly how the contract worked out, but again, for a team that's competing, if you can have a player like that that can give you a few games, especially late in the year, then it probably makes sense to keep him around. I think it just all depends on what you're looking like in the next few weeks. If you're treading water, I probably trade him. But if you're talking about the Chargers getting on a roll and that defense looks dominant, it doesn't hurt you having an all pro level player that maybe you can't get, consistent play out of game in and game out because he's not available, but maybe he's going to be somebody you can utilize during the playoffs that can give you a couple games here and there and help you really push towards a run. But as things currently stand right now, today, hell yeah, I trade him.
Mm-hmm. So he took a pay cut and he has a potential out this offseason. If they decide to keep him, it'll be a $36 million cap hit. So it'll be real heavy. He
Nah,
was
champ.
supposed to make 26 million this season and it got cut to 15. So I do not see that happening.
No, and again, like I said before, it just kind of feels like it all depends on how the next few weeks play out and getting closer to that trade deadline. What do the Chargers look like if they're, beating the crap out of teams and going on a little bit of a run? I could understand keeping them around, but again, like if you're, like I said before, just treading water, get what you can for them.
Yeah. All right. Cool. I think we're good here. Thanks everybody for joining us, even after this loss. A bunch of you here. We'll be here all week, all podcasts. Appreciate you guys joining us. Jamie will be back very soon, and we will see you next time. Thank you, everybody.
Salute.